Scientists with clearances could not acknowledge the Marshall Islands and other human subject research without placing themselves in jeopardy of federal charges for disclosure of state secrets. Russian scientists in Moscow were in the same position. French and British scientists also may have had to negotiate the divide between open and closed research in their own institutional worlds. That's another thing. France. The UN only recognizes results from French laboratories and US laboratories. That's it. They don't recognize anything else. And then there were the lawsuits. The opening vignette of these essay showed how DOE and DOG lawyers worried about the landslide of post-Cold War lawsuits and worked to arm health physicists as expert witnesses to defend the U.S. government interests. Chernobyl factored in these cases because the chronic low-dose exposure Chernobyl served up were more similar to the downwinder and human subject cases than those in the Japanese lifespan study. Acknowledging the existence of a pediatric thyroid cancer epidemic in Chernobyl, territories would have imperiled the U.S. government defense in lawsuits that were working their way through the courts at that time. Marshall Islands, Nevada Test Site, 3 Mile Island, and Hanford plutonium plant downwinders all pointed to thyroid cancer as one major health consequence of their exposures. Missed opportunities. In 1996, after the number of pediatric thyroid cases in Ukraine and Belarus had grown to the thousands, UN agencies could no longer deny the epidemic. UN scientists conceded that they had been wrong, that Chernobyl triggered the pediatric thyroid cancers earlier, and more significantly, that the studies in the open literature had predicted. With that announcement, dozens of research teams rushed to do follow-up studies in Chernobyl caused pediatric cancers. But what of the larger long-term epidemiological study of a wide range of Chernobyl health consequences? That study promised to resolve many of the unanswered questions about exposures to chronic low doses of radioactivity. The prospects for such a study looked good. In early 1990s, Japan donated $20 million to the WHO for a pilot study of Chernobyl health effects. The UN General Assembly formed an ad hoc Chernobyl task force and set to work organizing a pledge drive to raise $646 million to resettle 200,000 people from contaminated areas and fund the much expected long-term epidemiological study of Chernobyl health effects. Abel Gonzalez, the IAEA official who directed the International Chernobyl Project, had asked the UN pledge drive be held after his group's assessment had been published. Margaret, head of the Chernobyl task force, innocently agreed to delay the drive until September 1991. Unfortunately, after the International Chernobyl Project announced it had found no detectable health effects, ANSI's pledge drive failed. Instead of $347 million, the task force raised less than $6 million. The major donors, Germany, the United States, and Japan, begged off, cited the IAEA's no-effect assessment as a factor. Without funding, no study of long-term low-dose effects on human health occurred. To this day, scientists say we know little about the low-dose health effects, which we do. We know very little, and people don't understand that. They should say that we have little information in the open literature about low-dose effects. That distinction between open and classified literature should be made every time. It is an important distinction for those thinking about academic freedom and, as it turns out, unfreedom. In the following years, UN officials used the hasty, poorly designed International Chernobyl Project study to pursue a narrative that the only Chernobyl-related health problems were those caused by anxiety over the fear of radiation. We hear the same thing about Fukushima, too. Oh, they were so scared they had to get out of the area. That killed more people than the radiation. Yeah, we hear that all the time, and that's nonsense. Despite the reams of evidence coming to light from declassified Soviet medical facilities, UN officials at the IAEA and the UN Scientific Committee for Effects, UNSCEAR, repeated this claim so often that it was taken as reality. And we see that reality today. They keep on saying no one died from Chernobyl, no one died from Fukushima, and it's all lies. In 1996, Unskier produced a major review of Chernobyl's research. 3 Unskier editors, one of them the same Fred Mettler who led the International Chernobyl Project assessment, dismissed about half of the studies gathered for the review. These largely came from the Soviet researchers' reports of wide-scale health problems. The Unskier editors disparaged these studies as unverified and sloppy with poor quality control and warned that their conclusions could be treated with caution. The reporters summarized, given the experience thus far accumulated in the radiation studies, unless the exposures are relatively high, it is unlikely that environmentally exposed populations would experience markedly enhanced incidences of radiation-induced effects. Psychological damage and economic hardship, the 1996 Unskier report maintained, echoing the original IAEA-led assessment. Excuse me, sorry guys, this is long. Were the most pervasive and likely cause of health problems in Chernobyl territories. The Unskier reporters recommend against follow-up studies on low-dose effects because of presumably low level of risk. In 2006, Mettler authored the Chernobyl Forum Report, which largely repeated the conclusions of the reports UN committees had issued since 1986. The Chernobyl Forum Report today is most often cited as the authoritative assessment of Chernobyl damage. The assertion that Chernobyl was the worst disaster in human history and only 54 people died is used as a rationale to continue building nuclear power plants. And that's it. That's right there. That number, published in respectable material produced by UN agencies, is often cited, but it's clearly incorrect. Clearly. Absolutely. The Ukrainian state currently pays compensation to 35,000 women whose spouses died from Chernobyl-related health problems. This number reckons only the deaths of men who were old enough to marry and had recorded exposures. It does not include the mortality of women, young people, infants, or people who did not have documented exposures. People who moved away from the area, and they have no clue they were exposed. Off the record, Ukrainian officials give a death toll of 150,000. That figure is only for Ukraine, not Russia or Belarus, where 70% of the Chernobyl fallout landed. Underestimating Chernobyl damage meant that almost all the post-Cold War lawsuits related to exposures to radioactivity failed in the United States, Great Britain, and Russia. It left humans unprepared for the next disaster. When a tsunami crashed into Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in 2011, Japanese leaders responded in ways eerily similar to the responses of the Soviet leaders. Today, 34 years after the Chernobyl accident, we are still short on answers and long on uncertainties. Ignorance about low-dose exposures is tragic and far from accidental. An ignorance that exposes the breach between open and classified research. We stand with a leg on each side of the crevasse between those two bodies of scholarship. The rift between fact and alternative facts grew out of that deep ravine between open and classified knowledge sunk during the Cold War. Okay, Kate Brown is a professor of history in the Department of Science, Technology, and Society at MIT. She is the author of several prize-winning histories, including Plutopia, Nuclear Families and Atomic Cities, and the Great Soviet and American Plutonium Disasters, and her latest book, Manual for Survival, Chernobyl Guide to the Future, as a finalist for the 2020 National Book Critics Circle Award. So I want to thank Kate Brown for publishing this.